Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice, and I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And things continue to be messy in the Christian Reformed Church. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content. And we rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and give good feedback for our podcast. You are the marketing plan. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All of the money raised is used to further the mission and the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 1 of our conversation with Andrew Zomerman. So, Andrew, why don't you just kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and the church that you're at?
All right. Well, my name is Andrew Zomerman. I'm a pastor, and I have the privilege of serving at Dresden Christian Reformed Church. I've been here just starting my 7th year. Dresden is a bustling town in southwestern Ontario, a population of a couple thousand. We do have one whole traffic light, and but it's a nice small little town, nice small little rural church, and it's my privilege to serve there. I'm married. I've got 3 boys, and just love what God has called me to do. I like to tell people I've got the best job in the world. I get paid to tell people about Jesus. So,
Amen.
Pretty good gig.
Yeah, that's awesome. How old are your boys?
My oldest, most of the people here are U.S. listeners, right? So if I
I would
12,
say
that's going to mean very little.
Yeah.
He's a senior. He's a senior in high school, and then I've got one who's just finishing off grade school in what we call 8th grade, and then one in grade 6. So
Okay. Awesome. Our breakdown of listeners is about the same as the breakdown of churches in the CRC that are in US and Canada. So we do have a pretty good listenership in Canada though. So
okay. So
some will understand the grade 12 thing.
Yeah. I can talk in kilometers and people will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, sure. US people can just learn how to do the conversions. So so how long have you been at Dresden?
I'm just beginning my 7th year here now. So I served another church for almost 10 years, also in southwestern Ontario. So
Great.
I've been in ministry for 16 years total. So.
Okay, awesome. Did you grow up in the Christian Reformed Church?
Yeah, so I grew up. The church that I serve now is about 45 minutes, an hour south of where I actually grew up. So I grew up going to what used to be called Second CRC in Sarnia, and now it's got a different name, Living Hope. But I grew up, born and raised CRC, went to Christian school all the way through, grade school, high school, and then went off to Redeemer University in Ancaster, and then eventually off to Calvin Sem.
Okay. Now, did you always kind of know, or at what age did you start thinking, oh, I think God's calling me into the ministry?
Yeah, that was an interesting time for me. I was actually working in farm automation of all things, and our church was vacant. We had a guest pastor come in from our classes to serve for a Sunday, and that was from my in-laws' home church. And I didn't really know him that well, but we're like, well, you're from that town, so we'll invite you over for dinner. And he said, hey, we're actually looking for a youth pastor at our church. Why don't you consider applying?
Hmm.
And that was kind of my first intro to something like that. And so I applied. Didn't really have any qualifications. There were other, definitely, in my opinion, more qualified people, but they chose me anyway. And so I went into youth ministry and absolutely loved it. And while I was serving in youth ministry, the church kind of said, "Well, hey, you've got some gifts, but there's some areas that you're lacking in. Why don't you go take some classes at Calvin Sem and kind of check out what they have there?" And the church said, "Well, rather than just audit, we'll pay for you to take it for credit, just in case you ever want to do anything with it." Took a course and fell in love with you know work in ministry, and was really loath to potentially go into pastoring and not be able to work with youth, but
Hmm.
in both of the churches that I've served so far, I've been really able to also do a lot of youth ministry, which is one of the things I really love. So
Yeah. Amen. Me too. Yeah, I've been able to. I mean, I was a youth pastor for about 11 years, or youth director for 11 years, and then in my current church, as I'm a senior pastor, but I'm intentionally involved in a lot of youth ministry. So even just a couple of weeks ago, I got to go out to Classes, Wisconsin has their own like youth winter retreat for high school kids, and I get to go up there and be the camp pastor, which I said has been like it's the best gig ever, really, because you don't have to like write a bunch of messages, but you get to go up and do a lot of ministry, and so
yeah.
it's a pretty cool gig. So I get to do that to keep my toes in the water of youth ministry because yeah, I really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. No, it's something I've yeah, really loved as well. I know when I came to my current church, there weren't too many kids kind of like high school aged, but eventually we started a youth group, and we had a retired teacher who was teaching catechism in the interim between pastors. She's like, "Actually, I love teaching catechism. Can I keep doing it?" I'm like, "Well, you teach catechism, then I'll lead the youth group, no problem." So now I get to do that instead. So
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so what was the class that you took at Calvin Seminary, the one that kind of caught you on fire?
I think it was something titled like along the lines of administration of youth ministries or something like that. How to be a better administrator. So that, yeah, sure, going to get you stoked, hey? But I love the seminary experience, and just one of my old buddies who I played volleyball with back at Redeemer was in seminary too, and just yeah, it was just a really positive and encouraging place, and I felt like maybe maybe this is what I should be doing.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's cool. I remember too walking on to the various. I visited a number of seminaries and yeah, I remember having a similar feeling just walking onto this. I don't know what it was, but walking around Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I walked around there, and I remember thinking, "Oh, this is just a cool environment." And even Calvin Seminary is not near as beautiful as Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, but even being in Calvin was pretty cool because I'd kind of looked there for a long time. So yeah,
well, the West Michigan weather, I'm sure, is a big draw if you were comparing the two places. I'm sure, right?
yeah, for sure. So how was your experience at Calvin Seminary?
Um, the During the time that I was there, I was blessed to go with a number of others who are all now pastors, and actually, we still all get together. So I went with a number of other guys, most of whom were Canadian, and we just had a really great friend group. So the
Hmm.
seminary has changed and morphed a lot. There's a lot more international students. Well, I guess we're international too, but yeah, it's changed a whole lot. But yeah, it was just a really good time, and there were some. We still had some of the old guard of the professors there, some of the just solid and orthodox professors, and just so thankful for that, and the teaching, like just watching Dr. Jeff Wyma, open the Greek New Testament for devotions, and just like in 3 minutes in devotions, just like a boom, 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 and toss out gem after gem after gem of just this is what you can do with the text, right? Watching
Hmm.
Ari Later do the same thing, right? Carl Bosma, right? Like you're spending 2 weeks on the first verse of Jonah, right? And you're like, just the riches in the text, man. And I was like, this is fantastic. This is beautiful. This is what I love. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just really ignited, like, you know, Dr. Wyma, if he's listening, sorry, I'm not a Greek geek. I got through grace. I got through Hebrew by the Hesed of Karl Bosma, but man, the riches are in the text, man. And just watching these masters, right, so gifted do that was just beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I love both of those guys. I got quite a bit of Wyma, who I really appreciated. So I actually tried to take as many classes with Wyma as I could because I just really enjoyed him. But Airy Leader was kind of heading out the door. So I got him for one class, and I forget what class it was. But I only had him for one class, but I enjoyed it as well. So
Yeah, some of those. Yeah. Anyway, I just appreciated some of the great professors they had there. It was fantastic.
yeah. And one of the beauties of Calvin Seminary is I've told a lot of people this, that the relationships that you build there with other pastors, and so you really, it was one of the biggest reasons why I went to Calvin Seminary, because I knew it would help. Even though my lineage goes deep in the CRC, I didn't grow up in the CRC, and so I felt pretty disconnected. And I thought,
Mm,
man, being a pastor in the CRC, I'm going to want to be connected to other
yeah.
pastors in the CRC. And so going through Calvin Seminary is going to be a really big deal in that. And it has been. It's given me all these different relationships with people, yeah, throughout the US and Canada. And yeah, I still connect regularly with a bunch of my seminary friends, and I'm 6.5 years out of seminary as well. So we still support and encourage each other.
Yeah.
So it's really
Well,
good.
other people who get it, who share some of the same joys, some of the same struggles, right? If you need to have a chance to say something about your chair of council, then there's someone else who could potentially relate to that,
That's
right?
right.
Not that you ever have to, but right, like it's just yeah, we still get together for a week every summer. We do a couple of book studies, and we've even got some grants to like some grants to sustaining pastoral excellence. I don't know if it's sustaining, but encouraging towards. I think
Hmm.
yeah, we've been able to do that. That's been huge for me as well, my peer group for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done some of that as well. Just to tap into something you had just said, having fellow uh I don't know, people other pastors, I would say fellow pastors walking alongside you in ministry is like an essential thing.
Huge.
Um because yeah, it's just, I mean, you can have good friends, and I've got some really good friends that I can talk to about a lot of stuff. But it's different than having some really close pastor friends who know exactly, or at least close to exactly, what you're going through. They've been there before, or whatever. And yeah, so that's one of the things in Wisconsin we've been working on for Classes Wisconsin. We've been developing little regional pastor groups that meet regularly,
Cool.
just to try to help support pastors and encourage us. And there's always, there's some discipleship involved in there too. So we're not only just supporting, and we're not always complaining about the chair of our council if need
Yeah.
be, but also challenging each other and what it looks like to be a faithful pastor. And it's been such a blessing to be a part of that.
Yeah, like we'll go to conferences together, right? And then, that's what we'll spend time. What was some of the joys in ministry this past year? What were some of the struggles? What was when did you drop the ball? And what was a ministry success, right? And people who love you enough to challenge you and hold you accountable, man, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And my wife even has friends who know what it's like to be like a single mom on Sunday mornings, right? Like it's just some of those commonalities, right? Some of those friendships, right, are just so beautiful. So
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. So what was the biggest challenge for you shifting from being in youth ministry to being like a lead pastor, a senior pastor?
um yeah, I don't know that there was um massive changes. Like I still get to do both in the church that I serve. The church that I serve is a small rural congregation, so I'm chief cook and bottle washer here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was at a fairly large church, over 600 members. It was team ministry for most of my time there, and then the other pastor took a call, and then I was by myself for a little while, and then another person came, and then I ended up leaving. Um, but yeah, like when I was thinking, hey, it might be time for me to take a call, I had an opportunity to go to a church the same size, and I was like, man, I'm gone an awful lot at night, and I'm like, I need to be the husband and father I'm called to be. My boys are little, and I didn't want to be gone 4 to 5 nights a week, so I intentionally chose to come to a small little rural church, and yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I answer the door, I open the mail, right, I get to do everything, and so the transition from um, one to the other, I spend less time in the church I currently serve in meetings, and I spend more time writing sermons because now with the two of us at the previous church. I preached about 3 times a month, right? AM and PM services, like
Yeah,
total, right? And now I'm preaching, 8 times, 10 times a month, right? Because yeah, do 2 services and it's just me, right? So I
that's
write
right.
more sermons, but yeah, I love I love that too. So
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't just a transition from youth ministry to a senior pastor role. It was a transition from a big multi-staff church to well, like me too. I mean, some people say I'm not in a rural church because our church is in a town of like 20,000. So it's a little bit bigger. But if you came to Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, you would realize it's a fairly rural area. And most of the people in my church are rural. So it feels very much like a small rural church. And so yeah, we're in a similar situation there where yeah, I'm the chief cook and bottle washer, and typically my role is beyond pastor. I'm the IT guy in our church, and so I'm
ooh,
usually the one fixing all of the live stream and any computer issues or all that kind of stuff. So
well, thankfully that's not my gift because I'm glad I don't have to do that.
there are days I wish I didn't know how to, so I could just claim ignorance, but that is something God has gifted me in.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Good
So
for
have you
you, man.
enjoyed that shift from, having, in a bigger church, you can be a little more specialized, and in a smaller church, you have to be kind of a generalist in some ways. Have you enjoyed that shift?
Yeah, um, it's been really cool to be able to step into other parts of ministry. The pastor that I served most of my time there at the other church with was phenomenal, and I would serve with him again in a heartbeat. It was never about this is my role, this is your role. Okay, this is what needs to happen. You kind of have this part, I kind of have this part, but like when my youngest was born, right, the other pastor took over youth group with his wife for
Mm,
6 months and then transitioned back again. Right, there was somebody who had a heart attack, a senior who had a heart attack in the hospital, and he was preaching on Sunday. He was still busy writing his sermon. I'm like, I got my stuff good to go for Sunday. Like I can go, right? And so a back and forth. So yeah, I didn't really miss a whole lot of stuff in the transition from the one church to the other. It was a beautiful thing in the one church. It's smaller. We sent, my previous church, we sent 50 people on a serve mission trip, right? Or well, with a different organization, but kind of idea, right? So 50 students plus leaders, right? And that'd be most of my church if I did that now, right? So some
hmm
different things, right? Like a youth group of 10 to 12 is a good youth group night for us, right? And, um, you know, that was, a really small turnout at my previous church.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. What have been some of the joys of ministry in Dresden?
would have been one of the things that's really been encouraging to me is a number of our sister churches around the area have no longer offer a PM worship service, and our church still does. And it's been encouraging to me to see other people, as they found out that we still offer a PM service, have started to come from other
Mm,
churches. And so, like our PM service this past Sunday, right? Like our AM service had, I don't know, 60, 70 people, right? And our PM had 40, right?
hmm,
And a bunch of them from other churches, right? It's just been a joy, right? To work through. Well, we did the Heidelberg, then we did the Belgic, we did talked about seven deadly sins. I just got through the canons, right? And now I'm doing a
praise
series
God.
on the creeds, right? And so like I'm working through like this coming Sunday the Nicene Creed, right? And looking at that and why are creeds and creedal statements and confessions of faith important? How do they help us? How
Mm,
do they guide us, right? And like I just talked to my consistory the other day and said, well, like once this series on creeds is done, maybe I can do something on like world religions and like so you've got a person who's Muslim. How do you not just say, well, what you believe is dumb, but like how do you engage them,
yeah.
right? How do you begin to have a conversation? What are some areas that you could lean into and ask some questions of them to get them thinking? So my consistory was like, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea, right? And like I love the PM teaching service, so that has been a huge joy for me. So
Yeah. Amen. Well, just as you were speaking too, I was thinking, and I don't know, I'd have to get the stats on this from other churches. I know our church, and I'm in a revitalization, right? So our church was really in a rough spot, 6, 7, almost 8 years ago, and but we've really struggled to get some. So our church, before I got here, had removed the evening service.
okay,
Um, uh, and they were trying to do like adult Sunday school to try to do some of that discipleship for adults,
Yeah.
but we've really struggled to get people to be part of the adult Sunday school. And as you're talking, I'm like, man, the evening service is really where a lot of that kind of doctrinal disciple. I mean, not that it can't happen in a Sunday morning worship service. Obviously, it does, and it has to.
Yeah.
But the second service has always been more of a teaching, kind of a laid back teaching service through the confessions, and
Yeah.
uh, and I think that would be huge in most churches that have gotten rid of it. It'd be such a good
Yeah.
discipleship tool. And I would also say probably it goes part and parcel with, as we've gotten rid of the second service, we keep hearing people talk about how the people in the CRC, pastors are saying, my people don't know the confessions. So how can you? And I'm like, well, that would maybe be a reason why.
Yeah. No, it's been, yeah, like I said, a real encouragement to me. And like I always, so I always like teach from them, and then after prayer and stuff, then I step down in front of the pulpit and I do Q&A time, right?
Mm.
And it's just so wonderful. Like I still remember, like I couldn't have paid the people to do this, but like for 3 weeks in a row, I remember working through the Catechism, and they're like, "Well, Pastor, you said this, this, and this. What about?" And I'm like, "Oh man, turn the page and come back next week." Right? Like they were just following
Yeah.
along, right? Or sometimes, right? Like people are like, "Well, what exactly? How does election work? Or what do we believe about the preservation of the saints?" Right? Like that. I just find that the comments and the questions, and then you can kind of really kind of scratch where people are itching,
Hmm.
right? And then it just gives me a neat opportunity to kind of go, okay, well, hey, I don't always know the answer to that, but the following week I can share that and we go forward. And it's anyway, that's been a
Yeah.
huge joy for me.
Amen. Yeah, I've said that quite a bit. The catechism is so well structured that it
Oh,
does naturally bring up questions where we've been using it in our family devotions for a long time. And so my kids will regularly ask questions. And I'm like, well, when we flip the page, we'll be answering
yeah,
that question. But let's talk about that. And it's happened in our church as well. But now we've been so when I got to my church, I started bringing in Heidelberg Catechism teaching just on Sunday morning because I'm like, well, we just need this. Even if we're not going to have a
yeah,
second service, we need it here. So we were doing that regularly for about 6 years, and now I've been shifting and bringing the Belgic Confession into our worship services. Because I'm like, we got the Heidelberg down fairly well, so let's make it a little bit deeper. And I regularly have people who are just hungry for that. They're like, oh, wow, that was really good. And they're coming up to me after the service with questions about the Belgic confession. And so I think we've underestimated the beauty and the power of the confessions and how hungry people are to actually hear these things.
well, to know why we believe what we believe, right? And like here, there's some pretty sharp people who've done some really good thinking in a number of areas. Let's study it. Why do we believe this? Well, here's where you go the opposite. Here's an extreme to avoid, right? Here's a heresy that you could be like delving into if you're wondering about that, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah. Anyway, that's been a huge joy for me, man.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think it's a need. And I'd be curious. Um, I'm also encouraged to hear that you've got people coming to your evening service, from other churches. It shows that there's still a hunger there from churches getting rid of that. And yeah, like I said, we don't have it in my church yet because I got rid of it, but I have hinted at bringing something back, trying to, anyways, because I find it to be a pretty important part of ministry.
Well, if you're looking for an idea, my buddy took a call to a church and they didn't have a PM service. He's like, well, how about once a month we have a hymn sing? And then council like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And he's like, how about once a month we have a right? And then we had a have prayer meeting. And then once a month we have a right, and we'll do a video series. And then once a month, now he's got a PM service back.
Yeah,
Right? It
yeah.
just looks different iterations, right? But again, and it draws different people. Like a video series might draw some people, right? So to sing some good
Hmm.
hymns and to talk about why we sing these hymns, right? Can draw people too, right? It just yeah, lots of opportunities, right?
Yeah, I love the idea of having the Q&A too. That's one of the biggest things I miss from youth ministry. I haven't figured out how to I've tried to bring it into our church a little bit, but in youth ministry, like twice a year, we would have a Q&A night where the
Okay.
kids could submit questions anonymously, and we'd have our whole youth ministry team up on the stage, and they would be answering questions and giving feedback. And I loved it, not only because it forced leaders to learn how to like answer on their feet, on their toes a little bit, but you knew you were answering the questions that kids were really struggling with and wanting to know. And it was the teenagers too. It was their favorite nights of the
Yeah.
year.
Well, with my profession of faith class that I'm leading right now too, right? Like it's just three students that I'm meeting with, but it's phenomenal, right? Because again, where are your questions? What do you wonder about, right? Like you're going to go in front of the church potentially and say, "This is what I believe." Do you actually know what we believe?
Hmm.
Well, let's talk about it so that you actually do, right? And let's seek to answer your questions.
Yeah. 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 I've tried to do that more and more discipleship wise too, as I'm discipling some young men in my church and some guys my age too. And we always have some kind of a curriculum. And yet I'm always, if there's something really burning on somebody's heart, they want to dive it. We're gonna detour and answer some of those questions because you're getting at some of those deeper questions that they're trying to figure out. And I think when you can start answering those kind of questions, it creates more of a hunger to learn about some of these other things. It seems like it's kind of this it fuels the fire when you're starting to they're getting answers to things that they've been wrestling with for a while. Then they're like, okay, well, if that's true, now what about this? And now I've got questions about this, and I've got questions about that, and it kind of brings an energy to discipleship.
Absolutely, right? It's just I don't know. I find that fantastic, so I just love it.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I'd be curious to hear, what's you don't have to, obviously I'm not asking you to name names or anything, but what's the atmosphere in Canada right now, right? I think a lot of people, especially people in the States are kind of looking over into Canada. I mean, and I'm not talking politically, I'm
I've
talking
got a 50% so.
denominationally. Yeah, I don't want to get into the politics stuff right now, but denominationally, um, what how does it feel there after the last few synods? And yeah, what's your take?
Um, yeah, Canada has been um, more progressive and farther to the left of the U.S. on a number of fronts for many years, and so there are some churches that are here in Canada that very much lament some of the directions that Synod has taken. There are other churches, my church being one of them, which is more encouraged by it. And so, like we just had a pretty big classes meeting, and there were some overtures regarding re-signing the covenant, right? And some people arguing
Mm-hmm.
that we should be doing this, even though Synod had encouraged us to do so, and others saying yes, we should. And the ultimate decision was that we would resign. But yeah, it was interesting to listen to other pastors and why their reasons were for potentially not or for potentially yes doing it. And so it was yeah, that was it saddened me in some sense, but I was encouraged by the
Mm-hmm.
result at the end of the day. And so, yeah, there's also a movement by a few individuals to try and look if the CRC in Canada can kind of split off and kind of become its own thing. Um, from my estimation, I don't think it has a whole lot of traction. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's definitely a consideration, right? There are some people. Um, I want to be careful how I say that, but there are some people um, who are involved with that group who are definitely farther left leaning and disappointed by the decision Synod has made,
Yeah.
and so that yeah, that group is trying to get some feet under it, but I don't think that it is, at least in my
Yeah.
estimation. But yeah, and I don't think that it should. I think we are. Well, that it's a loaded term to say better together, but I think we are stronger when we stay united. And yeah, there are challenges of being binational, but there are also some incredible joys, right? And I love serving at. I was at this past year's synod and. Love serving with my brothers and sisters from around the denomination in different various capacities, and I find that
Mm-hmm.
that would be lamentable should we lose that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's been what I've typically heard, I would say, especially regarding the like towards a Canadian CRC. Most people have said they don't feel like it has a lot of traction. And so that'd be my desire too. I know I've got a lot of really good friends up in Canada, and as much as there are some US people who would say like, just get rid of Canada, it's all, it's more left leaning, it'd make things easier. Um, Most of my buddies in Canada are like, no, please, we need you guys. We need your
Amen.
encouragement. We need your support, and we need you, more than you realize as well, I think. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, some of the people that you're likely to interview on this podcast are going to probably feel along those same lines, right? But yeah, there are definitely others who do feel differently, right? And I want to recognize that. And, there are some things, but I think, our denomination has worked fairly hard over the last number of years. I'm going to throw out church speak here, but like the SALT report and the board of trustees, right?
Hmm.
They've done some incredibly hard work, and I think we are stronger when we stay together to try and
Yeah.
move forward. So I would like to see that continue to happen.
That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly into your email inbox. It also gives us the ability to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season, and keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.